Hey guys, tonight we journey into one of the lesser-known rabbit holes of Greek mythologies. Even the gods had their awkward moments. Imagine this. The sun is setting over a sleepy mountain village. The air smells like roasted figs and dust. And a god, yes, a literal god, shows up just to prove he's better at poetry than a half-goat with performance anxiety. Welcome to the mythological equivalent of an open mic night that no one asked for. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I always love seeing where you're tuning in from. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge up the dusty hill path behind a man who gleams like mid-morning Paro, god of sunlight, archery, and questionable life choices. His golden hair seems to hum faintly. His sandals don't quite touch the ground, and every step smells faintly of citrus and self-importance. You're not sure why you're following him, but he hums a tune as if the trees are his audience, and you're just background applause. The village ahead is old, sleepy, and unimpressed. Stone cottages squat low to the ground, like they're bracing for yet another divine tantrum. Chickens waddle across the dirt path, as if they've seen this sort of drama before. You pass a goat lazily chewing on someone's toga, completely unbothered by the glowing man who just arrived. Apollo pauses in the village square, gazing around, with the intensity of someone expecting a standing ovation that never comes. His lyre golden, ridiculous, impractical is slung across his back like a warning. Then he notices the makeshift wooden stage. A satyr stands upon it, hooves planted firmly in what looks like hummus, holding a flute carved from bone and bad decisions. Who is that ... playing? Apollo asks, in the same tone you'd use to describe an expired yogurt. That, a passing shepherd mumbles, is Marcius. He's holding a poetry contest. He's won 3 Thursdays in a row. Apollo snorts a satyr, playing the flute. You try to warn him not out loud, of course. You've been in enough myths to know better. But your eyes scream it. Please don't. Too late. Apollo marches straight up, kicks a pebble in defiance, and asks the most dangerous question any immortal. May I join the crowd, which until now has been politely uninterested, perks up. This sleepy poetry contest usually filled with verses about goat migration and olive prices is about to become a divine spectacle. Marcius blinks. His eyes are watery, and one horn is chipped. He doesn't look threatened, just annoyed that his hummus is now god-adjacent. Sure, he says, but you have to wait your turn. I'm in the middle of my trilogy about mildew. You glance around. Villagers are pretending to stretch, yawn, settle into hay bales. You do the same. Marcius lifts his flute and begins. The sound is ... not good. It's reedy, too sharp, like a drunk pigeon stuck in a pipe organ. But the villagers lean in anyway. There's something weirdly compelling about it. One old woman even starts humming along, tears in her eyes. You're not sure if she's moved or just allergic to the moldy flute. Apollo watches with crossed arms. You can tell he's confused. Gods don't do second place, and yet here he is, watching a goat-legged forest creature hold a crowd captive with a musical instrument that might be cursed. Historically, the satyr Marsyas was known for challenging Apollo after finding Athena's discarded flute. Historians still argue whether the entire myth was meant as a warning against hubris, or simply as ancient shade thrown at bad musicians. Either way, you're here for it. Eventually, Marsyas finishes. There's polite clapping. One villager throws a garland of thyme. He bows with exaggerated drama, then gestures to Apollo like he's offering up the stage to someone who brought an over-decorated cheese plate to a family picnic. Apollo steps forward. He doesn't just play his lyre. He announces it, every note sparkles, each chord shimmers like sunlight off marble. The tune is technically flawless. It also sounds like elevator music from Mount Olympus's most pretentious dentist office. You glance around. Villagers are blinking slowly. One shepherd is clearly trying not to nap. A toddler is chewing on a beetle in protest. The god of music is using to a goat who whistles through holes in a stick when Apollo finishes. There's silence, not stunned silence. Just the kind you get after a lukewarm soup recital. A single villager coughs. Someone else sighs and rubs their temples. Apollo, clearly rattled, offers a radiant smile. No one returns it. Later, as the villagers argue over who actually won, while also pretending this isn't going to cause divine retribution, Apollo wanders off, mumbling something about barbaric tastes and pagan acoustics. You follow. Of course, you always do. And as you do, you notice the sky above dimming not into night, but into that cloudy, mythic gloom that always follows an offended deity. You pat Apollo's arm. Maybe next time, try finger puppets. He doesn't laugh, but the goat behind you does. Word count 1099. You trail behind Apollo as he stomps through the crooked lanes of the village, sandals scuffing the dirt in tiny little divine tantrum marks. He mutters under his breaths something about unrefined ears and musical Neanderthals, which is extra funny because, technically, Neanderthals were extinct way before this myth took root. Still, you let him vent. Even a sun god's ego has a delicate crust. You turn a corner and spot Marsyas again. He's leaning casually against a fig cart, munching on dried olives like he hasn't just bruised the pride of one of Olympus' most competitive golden boys. His flute dangles from a leather strap, still damp from all the passionate spittle involved in his art. Round 2 tomorrow. He grins, mouth full. I'm composing something new about cabbage trade routes. Apollo blinks slowly, as if trying to convert that sentence into a threat. You call that music? Marsyas shrugs. I call it honest. And, he adds, tilting his goatish head. The crowd seemed to enjoy it. To be fair, Marsyas had won, advantage the flute. See, according to some older sources, Athena herself created the flute. But after playing it once and seeing her face puff up like she'd bitten into a lemon, she tossed it aside in shame. Marsyas found it, cleaned it with river water and goat spit unverified, and became its most infamous user. The thing is, the flute has a kind of cursed allure. Not evil just ... haunting. The sort of sound that wraps around your spine and makes you remember things you didn't know you'd forgotten. It doesn't follow rhythm so much as it teases your heartbeat into changing tempo. Historians still argue whether the flute was magical or just acoustically strange, shaped like no other in the known world. That night, you lie awake in the village inn, while Apollo sulks on the rooftop. He hums a mournful tune into the stars, tuning and retuning his lyre every 10 seconds. You hear him whisper, "They clapped for a satyr." Yes, they did. You want to say, because sometimes sincerity wins over glitter. But instead, you pull the blanket higher and let the distant flute melody from Marsyas's hut lull you. It's off-key. There's a squeak. Someone coughs. And yet, your eyelids droop. The next morning, the village square is buzzing. The contest is back on. There's a sign nailed to the fig cart that says, "Poetry Smackdown Round 2." with no throwing figs scribbled underneath in what appears to be goat hoof. Writing. Apollo arrives in full regalia. His hair looks shinier than usual, possibly oiled with something suspiciously apricot-scented. His robes shimmer like a soap bubble caught in sunlight. He strums his lyre dramatically with every step, as if announcing his own divine trailer. Villagers politely clap. A few roll their eyes. One asks if he'll be done before lunchtime. Then Marsyas appears, wearing a crown of dandelions, and what can only be described as a poncho made of old fishing nets. He's holding his flute, and this time he doesn't play right away. He tells a story. It's about a river, not a named river, just a river. One that floods in the spring, where reeds hum in the wind and frogs sing backup vocals. And as he speaks, he lifts the flute and plays a low, meandering tune that feels more like breath than sound. A child starts swaying. An old man wipes away a tear, but blames it on a sudden onion. Apollo scowls. You can see his fingers twitch, ready to storm the stage and correct the tempo, the phrasing, the everything. But he waits. Barely, Marsyas finishes with a squeaky flourish. The villagers cheer not like mad fans, but like people thanking the baker for remembering extra honey in the bread. It's warm, not loud, and then Apollo steps up. This time, he doesn't sparkle, he just plays. The lyre emits a crisp, clear melody, mathematically perfect. Each note lands like a droplet on still water. His voice is measured, his lyrics composed. The song is about Helios rising from the east, about golden horses, about solar winds brushing the Ionian coast. It is impressive, it is powerful, but it's also expected. You glance around. The villagers are clapping politely. Again, a few nod in that, yes, that was indeed music kind of way. But no one's moved. No one's humming. A toddler yawns into her fig. Apollo steps down, frowning. Marcius, clearly sensing the opportunity, steps forward and raises his flute again. But before he can play, a goat sneezes loudly. The villagers laugh. The tension cracks. And just like that, the contest is over for the day. No winner announced. No olive wreath offered. Just a lot of fig pastry crumbs and a hint of passive-aggressive god rage wafting through the air. You follow Apollo into the woods after the crowd disperses. He walks like a man rehearsing an insult. He plays like a drunk woodpecker, he mutters, but they like it. Maybe that's the point, you offer. He whirls around. I invented the lyre. You nod carefully, and yet here we are. He glares at a bush until it withers slightly. Then he sighs. This isn't over. Spoiler alert. It definitely isn't. You wake to the sound of strings being tuned again. It's still early morning, but Apollo, apparently, doesn't believe in sleeping off humiliation. Plies. Silhouette glows faintly in the corner of the village square, lit by a sunrise that almost seems embarrassed to shine on him. He plucks his lyre with the intensity of someone trying to summon thunder without technically having the credentials. You sit up slowly, stretch, and wander over. He's glaring at the instrument like it personally betrayed him. This is a sacred lyre, he says, without looking up, crafted from tortoise shell and the breath of inspiration. You nod. You've heard this bit before, several times. In fact, there's even an older myth claiming Hermes invented the lyre by stringing sheep guts across a turtle shell and giving it to Apollo as a peace offering after stealing his cattle. Because nothing says I'm sorry, I robbed you blind like the gift of dead animal music. Apollo strums again. This time, the melody is actually kind of nice, lush, rich, full of whatever mood you get when you watch sunlight play on wine in a bronze cup. It's beautiful, but then he frowns and mutters, too emotional. He adjusts a peg. It needs to be perfect. You watch him do this for about an hour. Every version is flawless. Every version gets rejected. Later that day, the village poetry contest is temporarily cancelled because, apparently, a herd of wild goats stormed the fig vendor's booth and ate the scrolls containing Marcius's next poem. Marcius claims sabotage. Apollo pretends not to hear. Instead, he calls an impromptu concert in the olive grove just outside town. Villagers are reluctant but show up anyway, mostly because someone brought honey cakes and they need a break from goat-related drama. The grove is quiet. Sunlight filters through dusty olive branches, making shadows dance across the grass. Apollo stands in the center, lyre in hand, robes slightly less shiny than usual. It feels more human. He plays. And this time you feel it. The music drifts through you, not over you, not at you, but through, like a warm breeze carrying memories you forgot you had. He sings about childhood and distance, about longing so old it might have come from before the gods even noticed mortals. A shepherd gasps. A young woman quietly weeps. Even the fig vendor drops his basket, and just when you think he's finally found it's that honest note Marsyas mastered in his flute playing, the spell breaks. Apollo steps forward and declares, "Now that is music." Cue silence. The moment dies a little. Someone coughs. A goat bleats. Resist the urge to kick a pebble in frustration. You almost had them. You whisper later as he walks beside you. He shrugs. Almost doesn't win. Now, somewhere between pride and perfectionism lies an entire constellation of bad decisions. You sense Apollo drifting toward it like a moth to mythological flame. That evening, a messenger arrives. Not a mortal. This one glows faintly blue and carries a scroll sealed with Zeus's thunderbolt emblem. Apollo breaks it with a flick of his finger. "What is it?" you ask. He reads, frowns, then hands it to you. It says, quite simply, "Contest escalation approved. Olympus awaits. Bring your own instrument." And under that, in tiny, elegant handwriting, "P.S. No fig vendors allowed." You both look up at the same time. Marsyas is across the square, feeding a squirrel. He looks so unbothered, it should be illegal. "You're taking him to Olympus?" you ask. Apollo nods. "If mortals can't appreciate divine art, let's see how the gods do." You don't say it, but your left eyebrow twitches with a loud, unspoken, "This seems like a terrible idea." The next morning, you're on a goat cart headed for Mount Olympus. Yes, a goat cart. It turns out divine chariots are booked solid this season. Something about a sunbeam traffic jam over Corinth. So you ride with Apollo in awkward silence, while Marsyas hums flute notes in the back and snacks on dried olives. You pass the edges of the world as you know it. Meadows give way to cliffs. Forests fade into clouds. The sky shifts from blue to a kind of whispering gold. And there it is, Mount Olympus, bigger than any mountain you've seen, wrapped in mist. That smells like rain and expensive perfume. The gates are open, but only because someone forgot to close them after the last ambrosia delivery. Apollo strides in like a celebrity at a festival. The other gods barely glance up, hear us, reading something scandalous on a scroll. Dionysus, Biz, is halfway through a grape binge, and Athena is arguing with a marble bust about metaphors. It's a whole thing. Zeus, lounging on a throne made of storm clouds and questionable parenting decisions, finally speaks. "You want a contest?" He yawns. "Fine, but only if it includes interpretive dance." You and Apollo stare at him. Marsyas lights up. "I love dance." Zeus raises a lazy finger. "Then you'd better not disappoint. The last performance I liked was when Aphrodite slipped during karaoke. You don't have time to question this. The rules are being written on air, literally golden letters swirling above the stage. One performance each, instrumental and interpretive. Winner gets eternal bragging rights. Loser has to host next year's satyr convention. Ouch. Later that night, as you sit watching Apollo rehearse under the stars, you wonder just how far pride can fall. He twirls, strums, spins, tries not to trip on his own shimmering sash. You lean in and whisper, "Please tell me you're not doing finger guns." He pauses, dead serious. Their divine gestures. You sigh. This is going to be interesting. The Olympus amphitheater is shaped like a bowl carved out of cloudstone, perched on a cliff above an endless velvet sky. It's the kind of place that echoes even when no one's speaking, where applause sounds like thunder and sneezes start weather systems. Tonight, every divine seat is full gods, minor deities, overly ambitious nymphs, and a few bored constellations who floated in just to gossip. Ares arrives shirtless. Artemis arrives annoyed. Hestia brings snacks. You sit wedged between Hermes, who keeps whispering bets in your ear, and Hecate, who's knitting something that looks suspiciously like a cursed sock. The anticipation is thick, like honey stirred with lightning. First, up Marsyas. He steps onto the stage, barefoot, flute in hand, face calm in that chaotic goatherd kind of way. There's no fanfare, no magic fog machine, no glitter cannon, just a quiet goatish smile and a deep breath. Then he plays. It's not perfect. The flute wheezes. Once a note slips, but it's honest. The melody dances and dips like it's trying to tell a story that even the gods might have forgotten. About grass in the morning, about getting older, about small moments that don't make myths, but make lives and then interpretive dance. Yes, Marsyas, the goat-legged flute player, begins to twirl. He doesn't know what he's doing. You can tell. It's mostly shoulder wiggles and dramatic lunges, like he's reenacting a tragic fig harvest. But the crowd loves it. Dionysus is on his feet, clapping wildly. Aphrodite is laughing so hard she drops her wine. Even Athena tilts her head thoughtfully, murmuring something about emotion over execution. The music fades, the dance ends, and the amphitheater is silent for half a breath. Then it explodes with applause. Literal golden sparks shoot up from the marble floor. Someone chants, "Goat dance, goat dance." Marsyas bows, one hoof extended. A grape hits his head. He grins anyway. You glance at Apollo. He's staring at the stage like someone just handed him a cracked mirror, and then it's his turn. The amphitheater hushes as he rises. Every movement deliberate, practiced, impossibly graceful. His lyre gleams like it's been polished by sunbeams and smugness. He steps into the center, raises a hand, and begins. What follows is perfection. Notes so precise they could carve marble. A melody that climbs and spirals like a column of flame. His fingers fly, eyes closed, as if the instrument plays him instead. It's transcendent. You feel your heartbeat sink to the rhythm. Even the stars seem to sway, and then he dances. Not in a silly, shoulder-wiggling, tragic harvest kind of way. No, Apollo's movements are choreographed like a solar eclipse. Every turn is geometry. Every gesture is symbolic. He twirls like the seasons. He lunges like the changing tides. He spins so quickly, a breeze forms that nearly knocks over Hera's snack tray. It's majestic. but cold. The performance ends in a stunning crescendo. The crowd claps, of course, loudly, respectfully, but not joyfully. There's awe, not warmth, like watching a storm from behind thick glass. Zeus rises slowly, eyebrows raised. Impressive, he booms. Both of you. You tense. Here it comes. But, he drawls, dragging the word like thunder across a valley. One of you played music. He points at Apollo, and one of you told a story. He points at Myars, Y-A-S. The amphitheater holds its breath. Therefore, Zeus pauses dramatically, probably to savor the suspense like aged nectar. I declare this contest a draw. The crowd erupts, some cheer, some groan. Some immediately start debating whether interpretive dance was ever a good idea to begin with. Hermes owes you 15 drachmas. Hecate's cursed sock begins to glow ominously. Apollo is livid. A draw, he hisses. That was divine craftsmanship. Zeus shrugs. Maybe, but he had goat feet and feelings. Marsyas, meanwhile, is being carried off on the shoulders of a group of satyrs who just sort of appeared from nowhere. They chant something about freedom of bleat. A flute solo echoes into the sky. Later that night, you find Apollo pacing a balcony overlooking the stars. He's still holding his lyre like it might say something comforting. I should have won, he mutters. Maybe, you say, but maybe that's not the point. He looks at you sharply. What is the point, then? You take a deep breath. You played flawlessly. He played truthfully. They're both music, but one makes you think, and one makes you feel. He doesn't answer, just looks down at his lyre. After a long pause, he says, "They still cheered louder for the goat." You smiled gently. You do realize how funny that sentence sounds, right? He sighs, the wind tugging lightly at his robe. This isn't over. By morning, Olympus feels different, like someone tipped it sideways and forgot to straighten it again. The clouds hang lower, heavier, and the golden halls echo with too much silence. Apollo hasn't spoken since dawn. He hasn't touched his lyre either, which is beginning to concern you more than the goat-themed graffiti someone scrawled on the amphitheater walls last night. Marsyas 1. Sunshine 0 in what appears to be melted ambrosia. You find Apollo on a terrace near the eastern wing of the palace, where the clouds part to reveal the mortal world below. He's staring down at Greece like he's trying to hex it with his eyes. They laughed at me, he says, not turning to face you. Me, Apollo. You nod carefully. Some of them also cried. That's gotta count for something. He doesn't smile. Marsyas connected with them, and that goat-footed, flute-sputtering amateur got to be right. You sit beside him. The marble is cold, but the air smells like time and crushed pride. So what are you going to do? He finally looks at you, eyes the color of wildfire just before. It jumps the fence. I'm going to learn how to feel, whatever that costs. Now, if the sentence, whatever that costs, makes your scalp prickle with anxiety, congratulations, still alive. Unfortunately, Apollo has never been great at cost-benefit analysis. You follow him as he marches off, past Dionysus asleep in a fig tree, past Artemis practicing archery by blindfold, and straight to the underworld elevator. Yes, there's an elevator. Don't ask, you hesitate. Are we seriously going down? There, Apollo presses the obsidian rune for chthonic emotions, like it's a vending machine button. Where better to learn sorrow? The descent is slow, cold. The walls drip shadows instead of moisture. As you drop past the river Styx, you catch a glimpse of Charon, scrolling through something on a curse. Scroll, probably the underworld's version of social media. #dead inside the doors open into a misty corridor lit by softly glowing bones. Ahead lies the Court of Echoes, where mortals go to speak the things they never said while alive. It's considered the emotional mop bucket of the underworld. Apollo strides in with his golden sandals clicking defiantly. At the center is a pool, dark as spilled ink, ringed with silver reeds. It reflects not your face, but your feelings. You look down and see a swirl of sleep deprivation, second-hand embarrassment, and faint nostalgia for figs. Apollo kneels and whispers something into the water. It doesn't echo, it answers. You don't hear it, but you see his shoulders twitch. He shudders once, then again. The lyre on his back hums faintly, as though vibrating in sympathy. By beat later, the reeds stir, and music rises from the pool knot. Pretty music, but raw. The kind that sounds like heartbreak chewing through its own chords. No meter, no form, just grief, sung badly. A tear rolls down Apollo's cheek. You blink. That might be a first in all of Greek mythology. Historians still argue whether any god besides Hestia has ever shown sincere, unfiltered sadness. Some even claim the myths were cleaned up by poets embarrassed by divine emotions. Then something strange happens. Apollo begins to plane it perfectly, not theatrically, but hesitantly, like a child picking at strings. The notes don't ascend, they descend, settling low into your bones like winter dot. He stops. That's it, he says. That's what Marsyas did you. Nod. He just let himself be seen. Apollo touches the pool again, and this time it reflects him not, the divine golden hero, but a lonely boy abandoned by Leto in a cave while she gave birth to his twin. A boy who once built sand towers to the sun and cried when they melted. A boy who practiced chords alone in valleys no one listened to. Let's go, he whispers. Back on Olympus. Everything looks the same, but something's changed. You can feel it. Apollo performs again, that night knot on a stage. Not for judges, not with any grand declaration. Just him, a firelit courtyard, and a handful of gods who sit quietly under moonlight. He sings about failure, about learning the wrong lesson before the right one arrives, about not being the favorite even when you shine. No one claps, but no one moves either, not even Ares, who looks deeply uncomfortable and vaguely damped. You realize something. Apollo didn't come here to win. Not anymore. He came to understand. And he does. Later, as you walk with him toward your sleeping quarters. if clouds count as mattresses. He speaks quietly. I think I hated Marcius, because he reminded me what I forgot. You raise an eyebrow, which is that art isn't about proving you're better. It's about showing you're real. You smile. That'll make a great bumper sticker. He grins, tired but lighter. Maybe I'll write it into a ballad, something that doesn't need a contest to matter. You lie awake a long while, watching clouds drift by outside your window, wondering how often gods feel like they've lost something they didn't know they had. Maybe not often, maybe always. The next morning, the sun rises a little differently, not later or earlier, just softer, as if Apollo is coaxing it up instead of flinging it over the sky like usual. You squint out the window and wonder if this is what emotional growth looks like in Lightfall. The golden rays stretch across the heavens in long, syrupy streaks, and the clouds shimmer with undertones of pink you swear weren't there yesterday. Apollo joins you for breakfast, which is suspicious in itself. He usually skips meals unless they come with worship. But today, he sits quietly beside you, stirring nectar into his tea with a solemn focus, usually reserved for smiting. I've been thinking, he says, maybe I need to leave Olympus for a bit. You pause mid-bite. Leave, you mean? Vacation leave or exile leave? Neither, he says. I want to learn from the mortals, the poets, the sad ones, the ones who write sonnets on tree bark and cry about stars. Ah, you say you're becoming a tortured artist. He doesn't laugh, but the corner of his mouth twitches. Exactly. And so begins Apollo's totally unapproved, vaguely rebellious, and extremely poetic sabbatical across mortal Greece. Naturally, you go with him, partly out of loyalty, partly because you're pretty sure he'll turn a tavern into a metaphysical metaphor if left unsupervised. Your first stop, Athens. It's bustling, brilliant, and smells faintly of roasted olives and unwashed ambition. You wind through the agora, brushing past philosophers in mismatched sandals, playwrights arguing about metaphors, and a street musician playing a three-stringed lyre, badly but with passion. Apollo stops cold. That, he says, pointing, that's the sound I've been chasing. You listen. It's rough. The melody stumbles like a drunk goat, but the man's eyes are shut, and his fingers tremble not from skill but need. When he finishes, there's no applause, just a single cough from someone's goat. Still, Apollo drops a gold coin in the basket and bows. You wander next into a shabby amphitheater where poets gather like moths to a flickering ego. Each takes turns reciting verses, some dramatic, some ridiculous, most delivered with the gravitas of a thunderstorm in a wine jug. Apollo listens, silently. One young woman, barely more than a girl, stands and clears her throat. Her poem is short, jagged, and oddly beautiful. It's about her mother's hands, how they used to braid her hair and now tremble too much to hold a cup. The last line is, I carry her voice in my wrists when I write. No metaphors, no celestial metaphysics, just honesty. You glance at Apollo. He's frozen. Later, he approaches her, gently, not as a god, not even as a performer, just a man with a lyre slung over his shoulder and too many thoughts in his chest. That was perfect, he says. She shrugs, clearly not recognizing him. It's just a feeling I had. He nods. That's the rarest kind. They speak for an hour about loss, about fear, about how art feels different when no one's clapping. She admits she writes because speaking makes her tongue feel heavy. He admits he sings to hide the silence. Neither pretends to have answers. Later, he plays her a song, one he's never played before. It has no structure. It wanders. It forgets itself halfway through. But it's beautiful in the way cracked things are beautiful. When it ends, she smiles. That felt like my mother's tea, she says. Too strong, a little burnt, but warm. Apollo laughs, a real one this time. It echoes off the broken stone. You leave Athens a few days later, both of you quieter, a little heavier, but filled with something new. Not joy, exactly, not sorrow either, just a kind of knowing. Mortals, Apollo mutters as you trek up the hillside. They break so easily, and still choose to love things. You nudge him. Sound familiar? He doesn't reply, but his next song hums low from his throat, and it sounds like a hymn for cracked pottery and second chances. Along the way, you encounter more. A shepherd who whistles lullabies for sheep who don't sleep, a widow who sews poems into her curtains so the wind can read them, a child who sculpts gods from mud and gives them stories to live by. Apollo listens to them all. Historians still argue whether this hidden tour of Apollo's was fact or myth. Some say it never happened. Others swear by obscure scrolls found in forgotten libraries. One fringe theory even suggests that every major Greek poetic form secretly traces back to a single lyre tune hummed by a blonde stranger who paid in smiles. You know the truth. Of course, you were there when Apollo learned that perfection is admired, but vulnerability is remembered by the end of it. He's different, not humble, exactly. Let's not get carried away, but aware. He holds his lyre with less stiffness, plays less often but with more weight. And one evening, sitting by a mortal campfire, he leans close and murmurs, "I finally understand, Marsyas." You nod. What would you say to him if you saw him again? Apollo stares into the flames. I'd apologize. You'd think it would be hard for a god to apologize to a dead satyr. And you'd be right. Because as of yesterday, Marsyas was still quite dead. But Apollo has a plan. Of course he does. You just wish it didn't involve hiking back to the one place even the gods avoid when they're having a tender moment. The Cave of Echoes. Deep in the forgotten folds of Phrygia, where the wind doesn't blow around the mountain, it just gets swallowed whole. The cave is where Marsyas first found that fateful flute, the one Athena discarded in a fit of vanity. It's also where Apollo eventually hung his flayed skin, yes. Still, a disturbing phrase. No matter how poetic the myths try to make it, the trail is overgrown. The trees lean in close, as if trying to overhear your thoughts. Even the birds go, "Be silent. and you're pretty sure the sun slows down out of respect or dread. When you finally reach the cave entrance, the air is cooler, not cold still, like it hasn't moved since myth was new. Apollo stands at the mouth and exhales slowly. "He's in there," he says. You raise an eyebrow, as in spiritually, as in all of him. His grief, his voice, his defiance, it never left. This place holds it like a wine jug holds fire. You take one step inside and feel it, the echo of injustice. It's not loud, just persistent. A soft hum of "I didn't deserve" that threaded through stone. Apollo walks in and doesn't flinch. He places his lyre at the center of the cave, sits cross-legged before it, and closes his eyes. "I'm not here to play over you," he says, voice steady. "I'm here to listen." The air sharpens. The echoes shiver, and then music, but not from the lyre. A low, raspy melody winds out of the stone itself, like a flute being played from the belly of the mountain. It's old, imperfect, and raw. It breaks your heart a little just to hear it. Apollo listens, nodding with each tremble of sound. No godly glamour, no radiant aura, just a man owning what he did and what he misunderstood. "I thought you were mocking me," he whispers. "I see now you were just free." The cave stirs. A sudden gust blows from the back, not cold but curious, like the cave itself is sighing through its ribs. A faint shimmer appears on the far wall of shadow, vaguely, satyr-shaped, arms folded, not vengeful, not smug, just waiting. Apollo stands. "Marcius," he says gently, "I came to say I was wrong." Silence. You hold your breath. Then a single flute, note sharp, short, and suspiciously like a HMPH. Apollo smiles. "Okay, fair. I deserved that." He steps forward and presses 2 fingers to the walls. The shimmer flutters like a candle behind silk. "You taught me something I couldn't learn in Olympus. That pain has a place in beauty. That music doesn't need to be divine to matter." Historians still debate what happened next. Some say the shadow faded into the rock, finally at peace. Others claim the cave still sings when it rains, and the song it hums is half flute, half lyre. All you know is that the tension in Apollo's shoulders melts as he turns to leave. No lightning bolts, no earthquakes, just a quiet relief that feels like forgiveness. On the way back down the path, he doesn't speak for a long time. Finally, he says, "I used to think perfection was the point." You glance at him, and now he kicks a stone down the trail. "Now I think it's about making something even. If it's cracked." You smile. "That's very mortal of you." "I know," he says. "Feels good, actually." That night, back near the coast, you both camp under stars so bright they might be jealous of their own reflection in Apollo's eyes. He doesn't summon firelight. This time just hums a soft tune, letting the darkness sit beside you like a guest at the table. You catch glimpses of his thoughts between the pauses. In his melody, regret, humility, a strange new peace, the kind you only earn by kneeling in caves to talk to ghosts. And then, after a while, he plays a new song. It begins with a single plucked string off key, intentional, then a pause, then another. Soon, a full melody forms, stumbling at first, then growing bolder. You recognize it, part lullaby, part elegy, and all apology. He doesn't name it, but you know what it's called. Mars, somewhere far away. A goat bleats into the night-off temple, wildly dissonant and weirdly beautiful. Apollo smiles. I think he'd like that. You nod. He'd probably hate it just enough to feel flattered. Bill, you lie down in the grass, watching the stars shift slowly across the sky, and wonder if this is what peace feels like. Not silence, but sound that doesn't have to prove anything. Apollo leans back, arms folded behind his head. You think the other gods will notice I've changed. You smirk. Oh, they'll notice. They'll probably write a myth about it. He laughs this time, without any weight behind it. Just laughter, warm and loose, carried by the breeze. And somewhere deep in Phrygia, a cave sings back. You wake too, the smell of salt air and pine resin. The waves hushing the shore in a rhythm that's more lullaby than storm. Apollo's already up. Of course, gods don't really sleep so much as meditate dramatically at sunrise. He's perched on a driftwood log, tuning his lyre with a kind of expression normally reserved for tragic romance novels and deep existential crises. You sit beside him, brushing grass from your cheek. So, what now? Go home, declare emotional victory, throw a small festival in your honor. He plucks a discordant string. Not yet. There's one more thing. You brace yourself. Please tell me it's not slaying another metaphor. He shakes his head. A contest. You blink. You want to do the poetry contest now. Apollo nods. Not just any contest. The great Delian verse-off. The oldest, pettiest, most chaotic poetry throwdown in all of Greece. You stare at him. I thought that was just a legend poets made up to justify drinking wine and insulting each other in verse. Exactly. He grins. It's perfect. Now, here's the thing. The great Delian verse-off does exist. Sort of. It's not advertised. There are no posters, just whispers among the oldest poets and a slightly magical crow that delivers invitations by dropping laurel leaves on your head, which, by the way, happens to you about 10 minutes later. You've got to be kidding, you mutter, plucking a leaf from your hair. Apollo winks. Told you. The contest is held on Delos, his birthplace, tiny, sun-bleached island that's more shrine than town. Everything smells like lavender and old glory. The amphitheater sits at the island's heart, nestled between crumbling columns and suspiciously theatrical seagulls. Poets begin arriving, not just mortals, but dryads, satyrs, one very angry muse, and at least 3 demigods nursing lifelong grudges. The air hums with tension, ego, and barely restrained iambic pentameter. One of the judges is Calliope, muse of epic poetry and wearer of a cloak that somehow billows even when there's no wind. She eyes Apollo coolly. Here to redeem yourself, golden boy. He bows just enough to be respectful. Here to listen, maybe also crush some egos, but mostly listen. The crowd murmurs. Someone drops a scroll in disbelief. The rules are simple. 3 rounds, 1 free verse, 1 themed stanza, 1 improvisational insult poem. Yes, really. Points awarded for emotion, originality, and not using the word moon too many times. You're not competing, but you do get a front row rock and an honorary grape. Perks of divine proximity. The first round begins. A mortal woman steps up and delivers a quiet, aching poem about her son leaving for war. No rhymes, no fireworks, just raw love dressed as fear. The crowd is silent when she finishes. Even the muse nods once approval. Not politeness. Apollo follows. He plucks 3 notes from his lyre, then speaks not sings a piece called Hollow Reed. It's about Marsyas, about mistakes, about what's left unplayed. His voice cracks once, not by accident. The amphitheater doesn't erupt in applause. Bite sighs. Historians still argue whether this round marked the birth of spoken word poetry in Greece. One fringe scholar insists it also caused 3 spontaneous breakups and 1 engagement proposal in the front row. The facts are unclear, but the emotions, crystal. Second round, ode to loss. Because why not twist the dagger? A satyr performs a bawdy lament for his lost wine jug. A dryad mourns a grove cut for olive oil. Then Apollo steps forward and simply hums. No words, just a melody shaped like memory. It feels like lying in your grandmother's lap, listening to stories about stars you've never seen. The muse dabs one eye. Ooh, she mutters. Fine. Now the 3rd round. Improvisational. Insults. The poetry equivalent of a bar fight in iambic pentameter. You didn't expect Apollo to join this round. He's too elegant, too poised. But then a smug demigod struts to center stage and recites, "O golden god with golden hair, you strum your lyre with pomp and flair. But all your songs are cold, and tame your music's light, but lacks a flame." The crowd OOOOOHS. Apollo smiles, steps forward, and replies, "You call me tame. How very bold. Yet here you stand, your rhymes gone cold. My light, you say, has lost its heat. Then why's your verse stuck on repeat?" Gasps, laughter, even the muse chuckles. The demigod looks like he's considering changing careers. Apollo bows, walks off stage, and shrugs. Still got it. You clap slowly. Not bad for a reformed egotist. The contest ends. No formal winner is declared, because in true poetic tradition, victory is a matter of personal interpretation, and who can look the smuggest without blinking. But Calliope catches Apollo's eye before leaving. Next time, bring less perfection, bend more pain. That's when you're interesting. You leave Delos that night under a bruised purple sky. The sea whispers against the hull as your ferry glides away from the island. Apollo doesn't gloat. He just watches the stars and hums that wordless melody again. You know, you say, that insult round was the highlight of my week. Grins your welcome. Somewhere behind you, the amphitheater crumbles a little more. Somewhere ahead, the world waits for the god who learned to be human if only in verse. The sea air is sticky with salt and memory as you dock in Nexus. You weren't planning to come here. Apollo certainly wasn't, but the wind insists. And when the wind in the Aegean insists, you listen, especially when it smells vaguely like citrus and cosmic fate. Naxos is the kind of island that doesn't care if you're a god. Its cliffs shrug at divinity. Its goats stare down the celestial. Its wine goes straight to the truth. Pew step onto the sun-baked stone and immediately feel like you're walking through someone else's old diary. This place has a reputation, you mutter. Apollo nods, distracted. Dionysus territory. Ah, you say. That explains the grapevines growing on the temple ruins. Now, if you've forgotten your divine family drama, here's a refresher. Apollo and Dionysus are brothers in the Greek pantheon. One plays the lyre. The other throws parties until the stars get drunk. Apollo is light and reason. Dionysus is chaos and revelation. They take turns ruling Delphi every winter-summer cycle, which is the godly equivalent of a divorced timeshare parenting plan. Historians still argue whether the arrangement was diplomatic brilliance or Olympus desperately avoiding fratricide. Either way, it works most of the time. Right now, though, Apollo seems tense. His shoulders are too high. His fingers drum against his thigh like they're practicing insults. Something wrong? You ask. He's here, Apollo says. You glance at a nearby hillside. You mean right now? A gust of wind answers for you. It smells like crushed pomegranates and someone laughing too loud. Then he arrives. Dionysus doesn't enter places. He happens to them. One moment, the path is empty. The next, it's confetti and gold eyeliner. He's barefoot, wine-drenched, and crowned in ivy. His eyes shine like someone dared him to turn gravity into a joke, and he did. Well, he grins. If it isn't sunshine incarnate, come to join the circus. Apollo sighs. I'm not here to fight. Dionysus laughs. No, darling, you never come to fight. You come to win. That's so much worse. You blink. So, ... This is normal. Oh, this is polite, Dionysus says, throwing his arms wide. You teen the toga-burning incident. Apollo crosses his arms. I came from Delos. I'm not in the mood. Then you're in the wrong place, Dionysus purrs. Because here, everyone's in the mood, constantly. Presents an argument brewing, the kind with centuries of footnotes. So you pivot. Actually, you say, we were hoping to hear some local poetry. Dionysus turns to you. His grin softens. Ah, finally, a reasonable voice in a sea of harp strings and sunbeams. He loops an arm around your shoulder like you've been lifelong drinking buddies. Come, there's a thing tonight. Not a contest. not a ceremony dash just expression. You're swept toward a thicket of fig trees, where a makeshift amphitheater has been carved into the rock. No formal seating, just cushions, candles, and people already halfway to spiritual enlightenment or public intoxication, maybe both. It's unlike any stage you've seen. No structure, no rules. A satyr is reading from a scroll made entirely of stitched grape skins. A mortal girl recites a poem about heartbreak in the form of a recipe for burnt honey cake. Then a nymph just screams for 2 minutes straight, and somehow it works. Apollo watches, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Go on. Dionysus whispers to him, voice suddenly low and intimate. Join us, but leave your perfection outside. Apollo hesitates. Then slowly he walks forward. No lyre, no glow, just him. He clears his throat. I don't know if this is a poem, he begins, or just what's left after I take the music away. The crowd stills. I once flayed a satyr for daring to be loud. Then I listened to the silence he left behind, and it was louder than me. You watch as Apollo speaks, not performs, speaks. He strips the divine from his words and lets them bleed, human. He talks of regret, of losing himself in brightness, of forgetting that light only matters in contrast to shadow. A soft rustle as Dionysus sits beside you. He's learning, he murmurs. You nod, he's bleeding. Dionysus raises a brow. Same thing. The performance ends without applause, just breath held, then released. The kind of silence that feels like a full sentence. Apollo walks back, pale and blinking. He doesn't speak, just sinks onto the ground beside you. Dionysus offers him a cup of wine. Apollo accepts it. For a long time, no one says anything. Then Dionysus looks up at the moon, grinning. We should argue more often. You get interesting. Apollo chuckles. It's soft, but real. Maybe we just needed better material. Somewhere behind you, a satyr begins playing an out-of-tune reed pipe. A nymph claps offbeat. A mortal boy starts sobbing into his olives. None of it makes sense. All of it matters. And you sit there between gods, watching them be less divine and more ... possible. It's not peace, exactly. It's something messier. But maybe that's closer to truth. The night after Naxos lingers in your bones like a strange perfume, half incense, half laughter. You sleep on a cushion made of fig leaves and regret nothing. Apollo, though, seems changed. He wakes quieter, eyes no longer scanning the horizon for something to conquer. For once, it feels like he's here not, just shining through the moment, but inhabiting it. The two of you set off inland, wandering without purpose through olive groves and abandoned shrines. Somewhere along the path, Apollo kicks off his sandals. He walks barefoot across dry earth, absorbing the land like it's a hymn he's finally learning by ear. You glance at him sideways. So, no more poetry contests, no more destiny-fueled detours. He smirks. I said I wasn't in the mood, not that I was done. You groan dramatically. Great. What now? Riddle duel with the Sphinx. Interpretive dance-off with the fates. Actually, he says, we're visiting Orpheus. You, stop walking. What? He continues, like he hasn't just casually dropped the name of the most tragic musician in mythological history. He's staying in a cave near Mount Parnassus, still composing, still grieving. Orpheus, the man who charmed the underworld with his music hand, then lost Eurydice anyway. Historians still argue whether he turned too soon because of divine interference or simple human weakness. Either way, it didn't end well. His melodies now haunt the wind like half-healed wounds. You arrive by dusk. The cave entrance is draped in ivy, and the faint sound of a lyre trembles through the air. Thinner than silk, sadder than silence. Apollo doesn't knock. He just stands at the edge and says, "It's me." A pause. Then a voice, fragile but recognizable. That's not an apology. Apollo steps inside. You follow. Heartbeat suddenly cautious. Orpheus sits cross-legged beside a small fire, a battered lyre in his lap and tear-stained papyrus scattered like fallen leaves. He looks older, but not aged, more like someone who's been permanently weathered by one moment. You came to gloat, he asks. Apollo shakes his head. I came to listen. That surprises Orpheus. You too, honestly. For the next hour, no one speaks. Orpheus plays not for an audience, not for applause, just ... because the grief won't settle otherwise. His music sounds like walking alone through your childhood home after everyone's moved out. Like realizing love doesn't always come back, even when you beg it in verse. Apollo sits with his head bowed, palms open, like he's offering silence as an offering. Eventually, Orpheus stops. The fire has died to embers. The stars peek in through cracks in the cave roof. You still think it was my fault, Orpheus whispers. Apollo's voice is low. I think ... it's more complicated than blame. Orpheus laughs bitterly. A god finally admits to moral nuance. Should I carve a tablet? You're about to step in. But Apollo raises a hand. You looked back, he says, and that was human. Not weak, not wrong, just ... human. Orpheus doesn't answer. His fingers tighten around the lyre. One of the strings snaps with a small, startled twang. Apollo reaches into his cloak and pulls out his own lyre, the one you've seen him cradle, fight with, mourn through. I don't use it much anymore, he says. Maybe you'll do something honest with it. Orpheus stares. You're giving me your lyre. Apollo shrugs. It's just wood and string. Music doesn't live in the instrument. The cave is silent, but thick with unspoken things. Pain, apology, maybe even forgiveness, inching round the edges like ivy. Finally, Orpheus accepts the lyre. His hands tremble. You know, he murmurs. They used to say your songs could calm storms. Apollo looks away. They were wrong. My songs only delayed them. Later, the three of you sit outside, watching the sky melt into night. No one says much. But there's a shared peace in the quiet, like a bruise finally starting to heal, even if the ache stays forever. You feel it too, that strange, hollow ache that hums behind all music. Not sadness exactly, just awareness, that joy. Put and sorrow are roommates who never learned to whisper. Orpheus speaks first. You could stay, work on something together. Apollo hesitates, then nods for a little while. You don't ask how long that means for gods. Probably until the wind changes or another prophecy hurls itself into Apollo's inbox. But for now, he means it. The fire crackles. A nightingale begins to sing in a tree above you. And somewhere inside that bird's trembling notes, you hear a melody forming. Not perfect, not divine, just true. Think Eurydice would have liked this one, you ask gently. Orpheus closes his eyes. She'd say it needs more chaos. Apollo chuckles. She and Dionysus would have gotten along. The night deepens. The stars blink like tired eyelids. And in the cave behind you, the ghost of a song hums its way into the stone, ready to wait as long as it takes to be heard. You wake the next morning to the sound of a lyre string being tuned carefully, slowly, like someone's adjusting their own heartbeat. Orpheus is already seated outside the cave, humming a tune that doesn't seem to have a beginning or end. Apollo sits nearby, watching, not instructing, not correcting, just present. That alone feels like a minor miracle. You stretch, yawn, and make the universal sign for is their breakfast. Orpheus wordlessly tosses you a fig. It's slightly overripe, but you pretend it's a croissant from Mount Olympus' exclusive bakery. The three of you set out without much discussion. Apollo says there's someone else he wants to visit. His tone is light, but you sense an undertow. Who now, you ask? Calliope, the oracle, Zeus's therapist. He grins. Hermes, you groan, the god of travelers, lies, and inconvenient detours. That Hermes, the very one Hermes you soon discover, is staying at a crossroads shrine just outside Thebes. Classic. He's lounging against a stone pillar, chewing something that looks suspiciously like ambrosia gum, and wearing sandals that are way too shiny for someone who claims to be under the radar. Look what the chariot dragged in, he says when you approach. Apollo sighs. I'm not in the mood. Hermes raises his eyebrows. Still mad about the time I stole your cattle. That was centuries ago. And besides, you got them back. You tied branches to their tails to fake footprints going the wrong way. Hermes grins. I was a toddler. That's just innovation. Historians still argue whether Hermes' early crimes were divine mischief or prophecy-proofing. Either way, the guy's been playing five-dimensional chess since diapers. You sit on a worn, stone bench while the gods banter like estranged college roommates. Hermes flips a coin between his fingers. It never lands. So, he says, what brings the solar celebrity to my dusty doorstep, running out of mortals to impress? Apollo doesn't flinch. I'm writing. I need perspective. Hermes leans in. And you came to me for perspective. That's like asking Dionysus for a breathalyzer. You expect Apollo to argue, but he just says, "Exactly." Hermes pauses. For once, caught off guard. Huh? He walks over to a stack of scrolls tied with ribbon made from actual moonlight. What kind of writing? Poetry? Performance? Something between confession and spell. Hermes snorts. Sounds like a Tuesday. Apollo sits. "I lost a contest to a shepherd." Hermes stares, then bursts out laughing. It's not mocking, genuinely delighted. Did he use metaphors or just yodel insults into a flute? "You're not helping," you mutter. "Oh, I never help," Hermes grins. "But I can intervene." He tosses you a small stone with a spiral carved into it. "This will get you through the gates." You blink. Gates to what? Hermes' eyes sparkle. Memory, or at least the good parts we forgot on purpose. You're beginning to suspect he writes riddles on napkins for fun, with nothing more than a wink. Hermes gestures toward a path that didn't exist 5 seconds ago. It winds into the woods, curving too many times to follow logically. The moment pews step onto it, you feel lighter, as if something just lifted off your shoulders without asking permission. "Is this a trap?" you ask. Apollo shrugs. "If it is, at least it'll rhyme." You follow the spiral path until the trees part suddenly, and you're standing at the edge of an ancient amphitheater, half cracked but humming with dormant echoes. This isn't a tourist site. This is sacred ground, the kind used for words that don't survive paper. Hermes is already waiting at the center, somehow having beaten you there. "Every poet needs a first audience," he says, "even if it's just ghosts." You glance at Apollo. "You ready?" He nods. Then, without preamble, he begins. The words that pour from him aren't polished. They trip and stammer, but they ache, and that makes them real. He speaks of things he's seen and things he never dared feel, of laughter stolen and silence earned, of music that healed everyone but him. A breeze moves through the theater, low and reverent. When he finishes, Hermes claps, slow and sincere. "Well," he says, "that was almost enough to make me feel something." Apollo laughs. "Almost. I'm still a god of mischief." Hermes shrugs. "I have standards." But there's warmth in his voice, and something like approval in his eyes. Later, the three of you sit by a crumbling fountain, watching a beetle struggle to flip itself over. Hermes, for once, says nothing. Then, without warning, he looks at Apollo and asks, "Do you regret being divine?" The question hangs there, bold and unwanted. Apollo doesn't answer right away. Then he says, "Sometimes, but only when I try to be something else." You watch the beetle finally roll itself, upright, and skitter away into the grass. Hermes nods. "Good answer. Not great, but poetic." As you prepare to leave, Hermes slips something into Apollo's hand, a scroll, sealed with wax shaped like a laughing mouth. "What's this?" you ask. "Just a little reminder," Hermes says, "of who he was before he started trying to deserve it." Apollo doesn't open it, just holds it tightly, like it's something fragile. And you walk away from the crossroads. knowing you've passed through something that won't show up on any map. The road after Hermes is quieter, less like a path, and more like a breath held in the earth. The trees lean indifferently here, like they know your names. There are no directions, only instinct, and for once, Apollo lets you lead. You're not sure how long you walk. The air thickens with wildflowers, pollen, and the distinct sense that something ancient is watching, not with suspicion, but with deep, tired curiosity. Eventually, you emerge into a valley that doesn't appear on any chart, calendar, or cursed scroll. It simply exists untouched, like a thought the world forgot to finish. At the center of it all stands a circle of stones, worn smooth by weather and worship. A few vines creep over them, but not in disrespect. They seem to decorate the ruins, like garlands on a tomb. Apollo stops walking. You pause beside him. This isn't on the itinerary. He gives a small, almost embarrassed shrug. It's where I buried her words. You don't need to ask who. You already know. Daphne. Historians still argue whether she ever loved him, or if she simply ran hard enough to make history. Some say she was cursed. Others claim she was blessed with clarity in a world that romanticized obsession. But here, in this breath of land held secret by time, you understand she was more than myth. She was choice. Apollo kneels beside the largest stone and brushes it clear. Underneath, a simple carving, not a name, just a phrase she refused to burn. You let out a low exhale. That's not something I expected you to admit. I used to think fire was everything, he says. Light, truth, glory. But she taught me some things deserve shade. You sit beside him. For a while, neither of you speaks. Then, slowly, Apollo unwraps the scroll Hermes gave him. It unrolls with a whisper, revealing a map not of places, but of emotions. Each turn in the parchment corresponds to a feeling buried. Under ego, under divinity, regret, wonder, fear, forgiveness. One corner glows faintly gold. That's where we're headed next, Apollo says. You peer at it. Looks like a swamp. It is a swamp, he grins, but the kind that sings. You hike half a day through reeds and sticky wind. Your shoes squelch embarrassingly, and Apollo pretends not to notice. But there's a strange beauty in this marsh. Cicadas buzz like tambourines. Dragonflies weave drunken patterns through the fog. And far off, a chorus of frogs seems to chant in an ancient meter you can't quite translate. When you arrive, the marsh opens into a clearing where reeds grow taller than men, and water glistens in iridescent colors. At the center floats a wooden raft. On it, the muse Polynesian, reclining like she invented patience. She doesn't stand when you arrive. She just raises an eyebrow. Lost your voice again. Apollo smiles. I'm collecting them now. Polynesian laughs. It sounds like a lullaby sung underwater. Have you come to beg for lyrics or just validation? She asks. Apollo steps onto the raft. It doesn't sink. You follow, less gracefully, landing with a wet thud that earns a look from Polynesian. You bring mortals now. I bring mirrors, Apollo replies. That shuts her up for a moment. She reaches behind her and produces a long scroll, still damp and smelling faintly of honeysuckle. I kept this, she says. The one you wrote after Delphi burned. You blink. Delphi burned. Apollo's voice drops. Long time ago, a mistake I tried to silence by pretending it was prophecy. Polyhymnia hands him the scroll. Read it. He unrolls the brittle parchment and begins. The words are shaky, unsure of themselves. Less God, more ghost. They describe flames, licking oracles, temples melting into ash, the stench of sanctity devoured by pride. But they also carry grief and an apology. When he finishes, Polyhymnia nods. There's your poem. Everything after is just footnotes. You ask, why didn't you perform that in the contest? Apollo turns the scroll in his hands, because losing with honesty felt worse than winning with charm. Polyhymnia chuckles. Welcome to actual art. You sit back and let the raft drift. The frogs continue their rhythm. The air smells like wet stone and memory. For a moment, you wonder if this is where Apollo will stay among marshes and muses, healing his ego one stanza at a time. But no, you can see it in his eyes. He's not done, not with poetry, not with mortals, not with himself. As you prepare to leave, Polyhymnia presses a small charm into your hand. It's shaped like an ear for listening, she says. Something your friend is finally learning. You tuck it away, unsure if it's a compliment or a warning. Back on dry land, Apollo turns to you. One more stop. You raise an eyebrow. Another ex-girlfriend. A remorseful satyr. He grins. Nope, this one's for you. You hesitate. Me. He nods. If you've followed me this far, you deserve to hear your own story sung. And with that, you walk on deeper into the valley, toward a clearing where your own name seems to shimmer in the air, waiting to be spoken aloud for the very first time. You don't recognize the clearing at first. It's ordinary, if you can call anything, in this myth-drenched landscape ordinary. Just grass, soft and warm, framed by olive trees that hum slightly in the breeze, like they've been waiting for someone to notice their song. But Apollo slows as you reach the center, and that's when you feel it. There's no temple here, no monument, no stone circle or enchanted harp strung with moonlight. Just silence and your own heartbeat, louder now, thudding like it's trying to say something before your mouth catches up. Apollo places his hand on your shoulder. This is the part you won't believe. You swallow. Try me, he gestures. To the trees. This is where your story began. You snort. Pretty sure I was born in a hospital or a hut. Maybe a particularly dramatic thunderstorm. But he shakes his head. Not your body, your arc. It sounds cheesy, but also weirdly accurate. He steps forward and kneels. With one finger, he traces a line in the dirt, then another and another, until they form a symbol. It flickers, glowing briefly, then fades. Breath on a mirror. That was your first thought, he says. I've had better ones, you reply. He smiles. It was, what if there's more? You glance around, and this whole trip, a long, ridiculous answer to that question. He doesn't say you're welcome, but it's implied. Then he sits, cross-legged, and pulls out a small wooden box. Inside, a stack of papyrus sheets. You expect ancient sonnets or epic declarations, but they're blank. He hands them to you. Your turn. You blink. I don't wait. You want me to write. He shrugs. You've seen gods fall apart over poems. You've heard marshes sing regrets and thieves speak truths. You followed a sun god across half the map of myth. Don't pretend you didn't collect something worth writing down. The pressure is terrifying, which, you realize, is how most poets feel. Still, you try. Your hand hovers over the page, then lands. You write a word, then a line, then a memory you didn't know was yours. Apollo doesn't read it, but he watches you closely. And here's the strange part. The more you write, the more the air changes. Not with magic or thunder, but with attention. The clearing begins to listen. Historians still argue. Apollo murmurs, whether stories shape gods or gods shape stories. You pause. And what do you think? I think the stories that survive are the ones someone cared enough to remember. You write that down too. Later, when your wrist cramps and your page is smudged with enthusiasm, Apollo lifts his lyre. He plays softly, just a background hum to your scribbles. The chords are unfamiliar, not heroic, not mournful, just curious. You ask, was this your plan all along? Get a mortal to ghostwrite your autobiography. He laughs, tempting, but no. I wanted to remind myself why I ever sang in the first place. And did you? His gaze drifts upward, toward a slice of sky framed by the olive branches. Ask me when the song ends. As dusk falls, something shifts around the clearing. It's not quite night yet, but the light begins to kneel, like even the sun knows when it's time to lower its voice. Out of nowhere, a figure appears at the edge of the trees. Not a god, not a monster, just an old man carrying a lyre. He approaches slowly, his steps creaking like old floorboards. You lean toward Apollo. Do you know him? I know of him, he replies. He's who I lost to. You sit up straighter. The man stops in front of Apollo and offers a respectful nod. You left before the encore. Apollo smiles. You earned it. The man shrugs. I didn't win because I was better. I won because I sang something people needed to hear. You sang about sheep. Exactly. They both laugh, and you realize, for all the divine drama and radiant ego, Apollo can let go. Just a little, just enough. The man offers his lyre. Trade you a tune for a truth. Apollo nods. They sit across from each other and play not competitively, not performatively, just play. One starts a line, the other finishes it. You've never heard anything like it. You don't even notice when the clearing fills with people's spectral, silent but attentive muses, mortals, maybe even a few myths themselves, drawn to this strange harmony of ego and humility. And right then, something changes in you, too. Because it's no longer Apollo's story, it's everyone's. And you, Sleepy, skeptical, slightly dehydrated, you get to carry it forward. The music doesn't end with a bang, or a final strum meant to echo through the heavens. It fades, like candle smoke curling toward the stars, like a memory deciding it's done being loud. You don't clap, no one does. It's not that kind of performance. It's something deeper, reverent. The lyre-passing old man smiles faintly, bows as if the moment itself deserves thanks, and then vanishes, not in a puff, not in a blaze, but the way dreams vanish right before you remember what they meant. Apollo sighs, not the exhausted kind, but the satisfied, let it go kind. You're still sitting cross-legged in the clearing, the olive trees swaying like they've been listening. Too, you run your fingers over the parchment in your lap. It's warm. The words are still drying. You don't even remember writing half of them. But there they are, tangled metaphors, accidental wisdom, doodles in the margin. Your voice, Apollo glances over and asks, "Can I read it?" You hesitate, then you nod. He scans it quietly, smiling. Once, smirking twice, and wincing just a little when he reaches the part where you called him a solar diva with commitment issues. I mean, he shrugs, not entirely unfair. You say nothing, because, honestly, you kind of like this version of him though, one who can laugh at himself, the one who doesn't treat silence like an insult. He hands the parchment back. "It's better than anything I wrote during the contest." You raise an eyebrow, flattery from the god of ego. "Growth," he says, with mock seriousness. "It's new. I'm trying it on." You smile. The moment feels light, unthreatened, like maybe you're not just Apollo's tag-along in some Olympian redemption arc. Maybe you're something else now, an archivist, a chronicler, a storyteller, which, in this world, is not a small thing. It's divine-adjacent. You stretch your legs, and just as you're about to ask if there's more road ahead, you notice something flickering above the clearing letters, slowly forming in the twilight like constellations choosing to speak. It's Pour, a poem. Yours, and it's being written across the sky. Apollo blinks. "That's new," you murmur. "Is this normal?" He tilts his head. "Not for poetry." You stare upward. The words twirl slowly, dissolving into stardust. After each line finishes its quiet parade, there's no applause, but the trees lean closer. The breeze cools like it's draped in your syllables. The world is listening, and that's when the voice comes, not loud, not booming, but subtle, familiar, hushed like a bedtime secret. "Do you still think poetry is boring?" It asks. You freeze, because it's your voice, and the question is your own. You whisper, "No." The stars brighten in response. Apollo places a hand over his heart, a rare gesture of genuine gratitude. "You reminded me why I started." You nod, and you reminded me why I stayed. You think that might be the end. The story has reached its cadence, its resolution, its full circle comfort. But Apollo gestures ahead. toward a grove on the far side of the clearing. The trees there are even taller, their trunks carved with countless verses, each one etched like it's been earned. "What's that?" you ask. He shrugs. "The archive, every poem that's ever been sung with sincerity." Your eyes widen, including the bad ones. He grins, especially the bad ones. That's how the good ones learn. You both walk forward. The grove isn't loud, but it hums like dozens of whispers, all remembering their own beginnings. You pass tree after tree, each with names, lines, verses carved in curves, and scripts from languages long gone. There's even one that looks like a limerick about sea cucumbers. You don't ask. Apollo stops in front of one tree and carves a fresh line into the bark, not with magic, with a knife. You recognize the line. It's from your poem. "Wait, you say that one?" He nods. "That's the one that made me feel something. It deserves to stay." You don't cry, but something settles warm in your chest, like a nightlight clicking on in a quiet room. As you move through the grove, you realize that some of the trees are dying. Their bark is faded, their verses flaking away. You ask softly, "Why do some poems disappear?" Apollo frowns. "Because people forget to pass them on." You press your palm against one of the trees, hoping, maybe foolishly, that your touch will help it remember. And that's when Apollo says the final thing that matters. "Tonight, stories don't last because they're perfect. They last because someone loved them." You look around at the grove, the trees, the sky still faintly glowing with your verses. And you think, no, you know you'll remember this, because you loved it. Even the awkward bits, even the frog swamp. You stay in the grove longer than you expect, long enough for the sky to darken into that soft purple gray that doesn't belong to night or day, but to something in between. Limbo light, the perfect shade for memory. Apollo doesn't rush you. He just wanders between the trees, trailing his fingers along old stanzas and forgotten similes, like their family portraits. You follow, half-reading as you go, a haiku about a fish's revenge, a tragic sonnet dedicated to a particularly handsome satyr, a 4-line curse written entirely in riddles. All of it matters, somehow. All of it counts. Eventually, the grove ends not, abruptly, but gently. The trees thin, and beyond them is an open field brushed with moonlight. You step into it with bare feet, and the grass hums like it remembers lullabies. Apollo joins you. In the middle, he doesn't say much, just lies back, staring up at the stars. You do the same. Silence becomes your new language. For a while, then, without lifting his gaze, he says, "You know, I never wanted to win that contest." You blink. "What?" "I mean, I did. Of course I did. I'm Apollo. I want to win everything. But deep down, I just wanted to remember what it felt like to sing without needing to prove anything." You nod slowly. "And did you?" He sighs. "Took me longer than it should have. But yeah, I think I did." You stare upward. The stars have formed new shapes, strange constellations that almost resemble the letters of your name. If you squint and forgive the cosmos for its lack of punctuation, you whisper, "So what happens now?" Apollo props himself up on one elbow. Now you go back to where? He gestures vaguely. Wherever you came from. Your bed, probably. Your overly long to-do list. The real world. You groan. Bet place again. He chuckles. Afraid so. But don't worry. You're taking this with you. You look down at your hands. They're empty, but they're not really. You carry the grove, the lyre's melody, the frog swamp metaphors, the poetry etched in bark and stars. You carry the gods in their crumbling egos and sudden sweetness. You carry the silence, the strangeness, the story. You ask, do people ever come back? Apollo shrugs. Some do. Most don't realize they already have. That sounds like the kind of thing philosophers argue about on windy cliffs while drinking something herbal and judgmental. He stands, brushing grass from his robes. You stay seated. You ask one last question. Was I just dreaming? He grins sideways. If you were, then it was one of the better ones. The field begins to fade, not crumble, not dissolve, just dim, like a screen going to sleep. The stars soften. The air thickens with quiet. You lie back, close your eyes, and the final thing you hear is Apollo's voice, gentler than it's ever been. Keep writing, little poet, even if it's nonsense, especially if it's nonsense. The world turns inward, soft, silent, still, wind dash down 300 words. The clearing drifts further and further behind you now, like a candle seen from across a lake. The words you've gathered, the verses and laughter, the strange riddles sung by gods. Who'd forgotten how to loose begin to settle in the corners of your mind like stardust? Your breath slows, each inhale longer, each exhale softer. Somewhere out there, Apollo is still tuning his lyre, fingers brushing gold strings like they're made of memory. But he's quieter now, less driven by the need to win, more content with the echo. The path behind you fades, and that's okay. You don't need to walk it again. The important bits have already made their way into your chest's maw, glowing things tucked between ribs and dreams. The stars don't whisper anymore. They simply exist, watching, waiting. No more riddles tonight. No more debates between gods. Thy and shepherds or frog-accompanied performances or sky-written poems that challenge gravity. Just stillness. The kind that carries the weight of stories, not as burdens, but as lullabies. And if, by some gentle accident, a verse from tonight slips into your dreams, if you hear a faint lyre strum, or see olive trees swaying beneath moonlight, don't chase it, let it pass. It knows its way. You've earned your rest, and you've already become part of the poem. Sleep well.